Schema.org is a vast universe of well-tested patterns of data types and relationships between them. It is the common language we can use to better describe the content of a website to non-human users, such as web crawlers, search engine bots, and various machines and robots coming from the era of Internet of Things. The current practice is to build a website and then use schema to mark up the content, practically at the end of the process, usually by using microdata or JSON LD syntax. But what if we turn it the other way around and use the schema at the very beginning of our designing process as an informational framework to describe our data model? We explore this possibility in depth through a couple of episodes in the new series, Designing with Schema.org. If you like our ideas and don't want to miss the next episodes, thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and follow us on social networks. So let's get started.
Hello, Nicola. What are we going to talk about today?
Hi. So today we are going to talk about the influence that schema.org library has on designing process from the start. The thing is, when we start building a website, when we start putting sketches for a website, we have different kind of approaches that we can take. But basically, first thing which we always need is to place some kind of information on the white canvas, right? In that search for information, we need more of thinking out of the box to get all the information that we need. First thing would be to take some data from the client, and after we extract that information, we start putting it on a paper, right? So we start developing from there. But we have quite a few things to take in account when putting all the information. Sometimes, for example, if we have collection of persons that we have to create inside of some dynamic environment, for example, website, right? So we create a collection of persons, and the schema in the database, which will be shown, needs to be defined from the day one, from the starting part of the prototyping. So when we are putting together what the schema will be, we start from the things we already know, right? So we start from the things like, for example, we're going to need a name for that person. We are going to need some kind of description for that person. We might need an image for that person to define it. But in some systems that we might design, we need to extend that much more. We can get that data from our client, but it doesn't necessarily mean that even our client knows all the data he actually needs in some kind of model. In that context, it is quite interesting to introduce schema.org as a framework that helps figuring out what data we might include in our model. Schema.org is semantic library, which is introduced to help semantically annotate HTML when building an HTML. What it does is gives additional meaning to the data which is already in HTML. And of course, search engines and other applications can parse that data and then extract something out of it. For example, it can extract that some person has a name, and that piece of code, which is H1, John Doe, that is actually a name. It gives it a meaning.
So we have a semantic dictionary that is actually available online for us.
It is available online for us to use, but it is also available for search engines to take as a definition itself. For example, if I integrate schema.org markup inside of my HTML and I give it a URL to this person schema.org type, web crawler is going to pick that information, and it is going to come here to exactly this site and take the definition from this link and say, okay, so this is what that code is all about. So we're here figuring out about the person. And then there is huge range of things that actually happen here. So if we take a look, we were talking about some collection about person having a name, having an image, having some kind of definition, but it depends what context we use that information in. So if we are going to build an application that just needs to define some persons as authors, some people as authors of, for example, blog posts, we might be quite okay with having just a name, image, and description. But if we are building something more concrete, more to the point in some other direction, we, for example, may have a need to add an address or birthday or birthplace. So we might need to extend that schema into some other direction. And that is exactly where schema.org comes into play, like a great informational framework to use. So just by exploring here, we might figure out that there are some things we might add. For example, okay, so does that person have a children? Does that person have a contact point? Does that person have an email? Is it a funder? Is it, I don't know, has occupation of something, has offer catalog of something? So it gives us a possibility to explore the content which we want to put that person in. And just exploring schema.org in this way gives us a possibility to get to more defined, more mature models just from the beginning of build.
Right. So we are talking about higher fidelity of information that we take from the client. Like they don't know what they need from the start, and then we explore through schema what they might need actually.
Yes, that is one case, that clients do not have complete sight of what informational model that they need actually is. Sometimes it happens they do, but it is not that often, and it might be a case for one model, for example, for authors, but they might not know if we have to include additional models. So there is also always a possibility that we might better define what they actually need. That is one case. The other case, which is also interesting here, is that it gives us a possibility also to include real content from the day one also. So if we take into account that we have to extend our model with, for example, birthplace and birth date, then from the day one we know, okay, if we have 5 or 6 collection items that we're going to develop, like user stories, right? That we're going to develop into content prototype. So we now know that we have to include those informations too. For example, family name or fax number, if it's a field that is used.
Okay.
And also, there is one additional thing is that by defining data in that way, we know how many visual elements we have. We know when information extends that we have maybe more visual elements to design that we first thought. So, for example, on one page, what is going to be? Is it going to be just a huge image and a title? Or it is going to have 10 or 15 other fields and other pieces of information that have to be put in that design.
So we are talking about content first approach.
Yeah, so it is content first approach, but it also is schema first approach. It is one and the same actually, because when we talk about content, that content for us people has two streams of information. So if I say I'm talking to Marko Marinkovic, what it means to me, it gives me two data sets. One is data set that tells me that your name is Marko Marinkovic,
Okay.
and the other data set tells me that you're someone I'm talking to. So two streams of meanings.
That I'm
And
person actually. All right. So
yeah, so if we just mark it up in HTML, search engine does not get those two streams. It needs additional data that will actually explain the first stream. So it's going to be, I am talking to Marko Marinkovic, and it will interpret one person is talking to another person. So, and
we are talking about kind of metadata that goes with the real data.
yeah, so it is still a part of content, but the difference is that we can understand it by our nature, by things that we already know, that we have learned during lifetime. So those contexts, we think about them without explicitly saying them. But for web, actually, it needs to be said. So when we are designing with information first and we are designing with schema first, the thing we are adding with schema is structure to the information we are designing with. And the thing is also that schema is here for quite some time. So it is already quite robust. And some parts of schema are made by schema.org initiative, but some parts of schema actually were made by touristic initiatives and medical initiatives, and then were included into a schema.org as a whole. So
We have
it
a
is
global collaborative approach to the dictionary.
exactly. It is global approach which only introduces fine details. It introduces fine details in all those schema because they were made by people from those industries they were made for. So that's a big plus. So when we're designing information with schema added, afterwards we can much easier is for us to figure out how to visually break those things in sections that we can design. So that is first part.
Right.
Another thing that happens when dealing with schema is from time to time it happens to help client define their own business story much better. Because what happens is that introducing all these fine details might inspire a client or a designer to include much more of those data sets. And there is also a place when using schema.org .org actually can even upgrade business model itself. For example,
Right. That's interesting.
if we have a small touristic agency and they have offer, for example, some accommodation in some places, in some cities, in some countries. So all of those items can be created into a collection and can be semantically annotated. In that way, they can be separated and used also at the same time as a dynamic model of a website. So when that is happening, when we are exploring, for example, in schema.org, what those data collections might be, we can sometimes find some information that we actually didn't know it existed. For example, if we start searching for something touristic, tourist agency, for example.
It should be travel.
It's a typo.
Tourist, okay.
Yeah, so suddenly it can be, yeah, exactly. So it is a travel agency. I made a mistake by making it tourist agency. So what happened here is that by mistake, actually I came to some schematic types that I might use in prototyping a website. So I can include touristic trip like a part of whatever model I'm making. I can include touristic destination, meaning that I can define it in some detail that I didn't actually thought of including in the first place. So, for example, let's...
So just by exploring the schema, you're getting inspiration, like what the informational model could look like.
Yes, and what is also quite actually interesting is by exactly what you said. By looking at it, I get inspired. But when I use any of these items, any of these types, actually those types are already figured out into extremely fine detail. I'm just repeating myself here, but in so fine detail that it makes it extremely scalable, and it makes it extremely robust. So
So what you want to say is, if I start from scratch, information model, I cannot make it that far as schema already did. So
no, it's actually not possible. It's not possible because it's huge. It's huge. So we can, I don't know, we can now try to explain one specific type, for example, and how it's built, what its anatomy is. So when we take a look at any given definition here on schema, we will see that we have a certain inheritance happening here. So every item in schema is defined as a thing. And so properties for a thing.
so everything is a thing, actually.
Everything is a thing. So what thing has from schema properties? It has a name. It has a URL. So those are basic things that defines it, where it is and what it's called. We can define it with identifier, image if it's applicable, and description, for example. Additional type would be, for example, this is thing, but it is also something else. So it is possible to relate them in that manner. And what happens that every field inside of that type can be of a different type. So any of these fields, like a name, can be a text. But some of these fields, like, I don't know, URL is URL, but subject of, for example, this thing is subject of some other type. So it can be related to different types. That gives it a possibility if you look at it one-on-one with, for example, databases which are based on graph. It gives it a possibility to connect one item from one collection with another item from a different collection in a way that it's scalable. So there is a direct link between this schema approach here, this schema type here, and another schema type which is connected with building it as an infrastructure on the web. So if I use schema and if I use relations that come through schema models, that is something which developers can develop afterwards for backend, for database, they can figure out how to put it one-on-one.
All right, right. So we are going to the level of data model actually. So we perceive schema not on the base of a front end model, to say like that, but on the data model that's rendered on the back end.
Yeah, it really reflects one on another. So it's something that can be that is actually directly linked one with other. So so we figured out what the thing is. So everything is a thing, and then afterwards, it is, for example, some additional definition. When I say additional definition, that comes here to, for example, place, or if we go to schemas, we can see full list. So this is thing, and everything inherits thing. These are different, more specific types that can be used. So it can be an action, it can be creative work, it can be an event, person, place. So this definition here gives it more concrete meaning. So if I go to place, I will see that first it's a thing, and then from there, it gives me additional definitions to make it more concrete, to make it more specific, so it becomes a place. So for example, what place might have that thing doesn't? It may have a telephone number, it may have a review connected, it may have, for example, smoking allowed, if it's that kind of place, photo, longitude, latitude. So it gives much better resolution of definition of a model. And this place, for example, now is more defined. But for example, that we had before, we can go and give it even greater meaning by defining it more with this type, for example.
Okay, so the place can be accommodation.
Yeah, and accommodation includes, again, one layer that wasn't there before. So it gives fields for number of rooms, if pets are allowed, if usage is permitted, and so on, floor size. What is interesting here is these blue fields, which are here for this type. It is more of them. Those are fields that are not included in stable version, in final version of schema. It is something which is still going through some checks, and once it becomes red, it's good to go.
Right, so these are experimental fields, to say like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Going through adoption period, right?
Mm-hmm. So what we had is that tourist trip, that travel agency. So we figured that, for example, if we go to tourist destination, we might have something which our client didn't envision in that way. For example, our client might envision that it is going to have some kind of list of offered places. And when we go to that place, to that link, what is going to happen? Something is going to happen, something is going to be shown. So it's going to be shown, for example, this is that kind of offer for this kind of price, and this is the place where it happens. But for example, our client didn't took in consideration that we might organize a complete website in a different manner. For example, we could say we're going to have a collection of places, and inside of each place, we're going to have a collection of accommodations. And In that place also, we're going to have touristic attractions, for example, like this model here. So for a specific place, we can say in that place, you can have this accommodation, you have these touristic attractions, you can take these trips from here, you can, so it's something that we figured out from schema, that we figured out by looking at schema and figuring out what is there to be used, what can be extracted from schema and put into the model itself. So in that specific way, what is the value that you might give is that tourist travel agency owner might say, hey, maybe wine tourism is for me. You inspired me by touristic trips, so maybe I should organize a wine tourism in some manner. For example, a lot of people are going to this part of this country, and there are a lot of wine producers, so maybe I should make some kind of trip for that part. Maybe some kind of trip already exists there as an organized thing, so I might include it in my offer. So in that specific way, schema.org actually changes even a business model of a client to a certain degree by giving the client itself some kind of inspiration for. The final part about this, it is that everything relates with development in the end. So what I mean, the thing that we talked about a minute ago is we have this kind of structure which can be transferred, which can be built upon even in development environment of some kind, right? So it happens when we start designing some informational model that some things come to mind and we put it on paper and those look good on the paper. But when we start developing those same ideas, same models, when we try to translate them to something which is dynamically delivered, then we come across some kind of problems. So one problem, for example, we are building a web shop, some small web shop, right? And we have a collection of products, and that's great. And we have each product having a name, having an image, some kind of description, maybe a review, and the price. And that looks great. So it looks great on paper. A client said yes, and we build it. And when client in, I don't know, a month starts to start to sell that product, what happens is that it's Black Friday. It's 8th of the March. It's some part of the year or a month where you should give some kind of discount. And what happened? We have to extend our model to include discount. From a perspective of, I don't know, front-end designer, it's kind of problem, maybe not. From informational designer, from, when we are prototyping with pen and paper in the beginning, it's not truly a problem. But if we're talking about developer's view, adding that kind of functionality is actually quite a thing.
Yeah, we have to think of how to do that.
Exactly. So let's try to figure out what it would happen if we followed the schema. So product. So if we follow the schema, what could happen? Additional property, aggregate rating, audience, award, brand, category, color, whatever. So
May I interrupt you for the second? We have a question that comes from Discord. So Archil asks, one thing that he's curious about was how well the definitions of these schemas are in web components, because it is literally built for them if they are currently interrelated. Would be a good ref schema.org to use in building web component lib if one doesn't exist.
well, it seems like it could be a nice experiment. I would like to see some code ideas for that. It sounds quite interesting, actually. I know it is possible to include it to a specific extent into reactive frameworks. So I guess for web components, it definitely could be implemented, but I'm not quite sure that I've seen any kind of implementation so far. I didn't come across it.
He says basically makes custom HTML elements as thought it's XML, and you can define the attributes as they are on the schema site. That kind of idea.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I would like to see something like that, just as experiment or even full-blown library. Yeah.
Okay, please go on.
Yeah. So one thing that I didn't come across here when looking at it is a price, and there actually is a reason for that. Because if you look at it, product itself, it doesn't have a price.
Isn't the price the most important thing of the product?
It doesn't have it.
How?
The thing is, it has an offer. So, for example, one product can be offered in the same shop.
Right.
It could have multiple offers. For example, you have a loyalty card. It is not the same price for you as its regular is. So,
or based on geolocation or something like that. Yeah, we could have different offers for the same product.
So if we take this field into account and we go to this type, which is related by this field, what we are here getting from this model is actually quite a bit. So among other things, also a price.
Here is the price.
Also price currency, something we didn't thought at the beginning. So for example, if we figured out the way how to include offers into our model that we talked about, after a while, we would have to include price currency also. So our developer would be very happy to change that too, right? So that is actually the idea is if we followed through schema while creating the idea for product and the offer and the price, we would actually be quite good with additional development afterwards. So if we already included price, it would mean we included offer. So if we already included offer in our system, we would be safe from difficult additional developments or developments that would change something rather than upgrade it.
But what if we don't have multiple offers per product? I mean, should we create collection anyway, or?
Well, that's completely other thing. We have to think first of a model. What we need for a model to be described, and then from there we can talk about. We can start figuring out which parts are going to be dynamic, and which parts of that information are going to be static. For example, I might develop a collection with products, and I might even create a field for a price. So in schema.org context, I would have to include offer somewhere. So it would be, for example, a template, HTML template would have offer like a static part, and then price inside of it as a dynamic part. But that would give us possibility to further extend afterwards. So it really depends on what is going to be edited by a content user, by a content editor, sorry. But that is something which is something that comes after. First, we have to figure out the model of something that we are presenting, and then a model how to edit that content. So it is also a good thing to talk about and to figure out exactly that thing from the day one also. So it is something that that can be also figured out through schema. So if we have, for example, 5 or 6 types included one into another, the question is that relation chain going to change every time we edit it? For example, we might have one thing which is related to another thing, which is category, which is related to a next thing, which is tag. And those things are always the same from some reason on the website. In that case, we're not going to create collection for each of those.
Yeah, right.
But the chain has to be shown in schema, right? But so that is how we are going to build it. But on the other hand, we are well aware that that chain exists. So it is our conscious decision to make it dynamic for just one part, or to make it dynamic for each part of the chain.
Right. So we start from schema anywhere, and then at some point we will decide if information is going to be dynamic or it will stay static.
Yeah.
And it's going to be reflected in HTML finally.
Yeah. That's about it. So do we have any questions more?
No, any more questions for now? Do you have anything more for us today, or that's it for now?
I'm checking. I guess that's it for today.
That's going to be that for today. All right. Great. Yeah, so
next time we should probably continue with trying to build something, to sketch up and build from it.
To design with schema, really.
Yeah.
Okay. No Headphones say thanks for the stream. Schema.org is infinitely complex. Yeah.
Well, it's robust. It's simple in the way it works, but it is robust. It's huge. So in that in that case, it's complex. I mean, it's hard for anyone to say he knows each property of schema or something like that. But schema is there to be explored and to be learned through exploration rather than by just trying to learn it by heart. So it's something to be learned through a process of building. It's a guide and a framework at the same time.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of just to remember ourselves, why are we doing this? Because we are learning a new language to communicate with machines, with robots, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's interesting that we take a new kind of a design approach that takes into consideration not only us humans, but also robots and machines. And that's what's exciting, definitely. Yes.
Yeah, it also got further from there. It is already included in EOT scheme. So
IoT, Internet of Things.
yeah, so what we have here is a definition for describing meaning on the web, but the same architecture can be applied further. You said it's something for communicating with machines and with human. So when we say machines, we're talking about the robots. It's Google bots or whatever search engine. But for example, if web was already built with schema, any one of us could build additional different kind of robot that might search different kind of information. It doesn't have to be so general purpose like Google search engine. It can be something more specific. So it might be something which is app for itself. It doesn't have to be a website. It can be a full app, web app. So for example, when we go to, if we're talking about the Internet of Things, what it might mean. For example, we can have smart houses, right? So you take out your phone, Android, iPhone, whatever, and you have an application which you installed for Play, from whatever, and via that application you can assess your house.
Yes.
And you can just go through application and say, okay, I'm not at home, so I would like my place to be 23 degrees Celsius, and I would like, I don't know, coffee when I come home, so I'm going to schedule a coffee for that time frame, for example, and I would like to take a shower, so I would like to have hot water, and I would like my, I don't know, bathroom to be heated up and whatever.
Yeah.
So all of those things, I just enter into that application, and it's something which happens as I go home. So, but how actually does it work? So when we are talking about the Internet of Things, it's not only smart houses, it's not only smart cars or smartphones or whatever. It is just about anything. In final version of Internet of Things, you could take your, I don't know, phone and take a snapshot of a tree, and you could get complete information about that tree. You could get what's kind of tree, which family does it belongs to, how old that exact tree is by looking at this or that or whatever. So, and all related data,
All the metadata, right?
metadata could relate to that tree. So it's going to be cut down in 2 months because it has something, I don't know, some illness, for example, and then it is scheduled already to be cut down, or this shrub here is going to be, I don't know, going to give a flower, which it gives only twice in 100 years. So it's going to happen in 2 months based on whatever. So those kind of applications might be built if the web is defined with metadata, with something like schema.org.
Yeah, as soon as we talk about metadata, then we can refer that to schema. That's
yeah.
So a lot of future related context here. And yeah, that's really exciting. All right. So let's finish for today, if you agree. Thank you for all these explanations. And for the next time, we hope to see some real action, not just theory, but putting some model on the canvas, right?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, thanks everyone for being with us. And stay tuned. Follow us, subscribe so you can watch the schema in action. Bye everyone. See you. Thanks,
Bye.
Nicola.